Welcome. In this video we're going to be paying particular attention to the concept of parsing and looking at some of the ways in which Accordance Bible software offers some tools to assist us in the task of parsing. Parsing itself is a process which applies in any language, including English, where we pay particularly close attention to the details of the text, of the phrase, of the clause, of the sentence. Indeed, you'll sometimes hear the phrase, the term used in everyday speech. If somebody has just been told something or read something which is fairly complex but worth paying particularly close attention to, they might say something like, "I'd like to really parse out what that person is saying." In other words, I want to unpack it. I want to look at it piece by piece and make sure I'm picking up all the nuance and all the implications of that piece of communication. And that's exactly how we use it when we're looking at parsing biblical texts, be they Hebrew or Greek. So parsing is, in a sense, picking up a magnifying glass and looking at each word and sometimes each part of a word to see exactly what is going on here. So if we look at that in terms of just understanding what parsing is, we could have a look at this chart, which is not the final word in terms of parsing, but it does map out the most important things you're going to be paying attention to, and it also highlights some of the differences between parsing a Hebrew text, parsing a Greek text. So in terms of a Hebrew text, firstly, there's a lot of overlap, but the task is slightly different, whether it's part of the verb system or the word you're looking at, or whether the word you're looking at is part of the noun system. So verbs tend to be more interested in things like tense and mood, and also person. Is this first person, second person, third person speaking, and so on. And sometimes the verbs will also be inflected or conjugated to reflect gender, and that's something that we're not so familiar with, of course, in English. We also want to pay attention to the syntax. What's the function of this verb or participle, whatever it happens to be, within the clause, and then the gloss. And I won't repeat this for every example, but the gloss is a very preliminary translation, a list of the default terms in English, which might be the equivalent of that particular term in Hebrew or Greek. So the verbs are going to be particularly paying attention to things like what kind of action, when did it take place, was it a continuous or repetitive action, is the action completed, is this something that I hope will happen, is it something that I'm instructing or commanding that it will happen. So they're the kind of aspects of a verbal system, and Hebrew and Greek will have different ways of expressing those. We'll come to verbs, of course, in a couple of weeks' time. With the noun system, again, more or less the same for both Hebrew and Greek, but we will see a few little differences. The noun system, of course, includes adjectives, nouns, particles, prepositions, and pronouns. And those particles can be conjunctions and definite articles and various other items. So one of the things we do, we put in the word, whatever it happens to be, Elohim, whatever, Davar, Eretz, Shemayim, and we identify the part of speech. Now, a lot of the time it'll be a noun, but not always, and it's important to be aware of that. Of course, the lexeme is the lexical form. Where are we going to find this if we looked it up in the specialist lexicon for biblical Hebrew or biblical Greek? What's the root? So what are probably in Hebrew, what is the three consonant root from which this noun or adjective has been derived? The gender options, which are not usually so significant in a verb, become more significant in the noun system. Hebrew, of course, only working with masculine and feminine. The number is a little bit more developed in the Hebrew way of using language because we have singular, dual, and plural. And remember, dual particularly occurs to items which naturally occur in pairs, and particularly body parts like eyes, ears, hands, feet, etc. And they're always feminine, as it turns out. So singular, dual, and plural. Hebrew has a particular twist in terms of state, whether something is in the absolute state or whether it's in the construct state. And we've already come across the construct chain. Determined is simply, is this a simple noun that's not defined or determined in any way, or has it been made definite because of its relationship with a definite article, with a demonstrative adjective, with a pronoun, or indeed with its attachment to a person's name. So a noun may be determined or it may be undetermined, and that will depend upon what else has happened to it. The cases are not so obvious for us in Hebrew because they tend not to be inflected differently that we will tend to notice. But a noun can be nominative, vocative, or accusative. An example of the vocative is which of course is direct speech, from the Latin for voice or to speak, voce, and so Shema Yisrael, the Israel in that sentence is vocative, because it's not Israel praise to God, it's Israel listen up, so listen to me, O Israel. Again, we want to make a note on the syntactical function of the verb, of the noun, and offer a gloss. Now it's much the same with the Greek, just a few tweaks along the way. So in the verbal system, the Greek verbal system has a different set of complexities from what we see in the Hebrew verbal system. So we'll be paying particular attention to tense, voice, is it active voice, middle voice, passive voice, and also mood, is it indicative, is it imperative, is it subjunctive, is it infinitive, or is it a participle? These are all aspects of the verb. And then, of course, first, second, third person, masculine or feminine, or neuter even for that matter, and whether it's singular or plural. Again, the syntax column, the gloss column are the same. With the nouns, very similar to what we've seen in Hebrew. You'll still be looking at what are the roots or the stem from which this word has derived. The gender side of things is slightly more developed because we've got neuter as well as masculine and feminine, and the number is simplified to just singular and plural. Determined still means the same thing. Is there something, an article, a relationship to a person, a demonstrative pronoun? Is there something else going on which puts some kind of determination on this noun or part of the noun system? Notice the case endings the cases are a little bit more developed with Greek. So we typically think of nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative, but sometimes you'll come across a vocative, and we don't learn it as a separate case. Most of the time it's actually written exactly the same way as the nominative, but its function in the sentence, we'll see that it's not describing the subject, but rather the addressee of direct speech. And again, you'll need to say something about the syntax and the gloss. So that's the kind of thing which is we're going to be trying to do for any word in a passage that we're trying to parse. So let's come back into our get rid of that. Let's come back into our accordance, and there are 3 tools that are available for us in accordance which help us with the parsing. The most obvious one is simply the instant details. So again, I'll turn on my larger cursor. If you don't have it on by default, simply go up to the top, you turn on the instant details. And if, like me, you prefer to have it as a floating window, so you're not looking down the bottom of the screen all the time, you come down into your instant details, you go to the bottom icon, the one that says Make Instant Details a Floating Window, click on that, wait a second or so, and there it is. Now, straight away, because I must have had it over a word, it still was remembering. So as we know, simply as the cursor moves across the text, and this is equally true in the Greek as it is in the Hebrew, what we're going to get is a very simple parsing. So we're being told what the word is. Let's say Elohim for now, since the cursor is there. Elohim in Hebrew. Elohim transliterated. Elohim as where you will find it in the lexicon, although ultimately its root is simply El, Aleph, Lamed, and then both of those forms are transliterated for our convenience as well. And then we get a little parsing line. Part of speech is in bold. It's a noun. It's a common noun. It's a masculine noun. It's in the plural form, and it's in the absolute state. It's not construct. Okay, whereas we'll see other examples where that would not be the case. And then we're given a gloss, and we're also told in brackets at the end what the grammatical or syntactical function is. This noun is the subject of the sentence. Okay, whereas this noun here is an object to the sentence. See the bit in brackets, as this one is as well. So we're being given some information about the syntax and the way these words are functioning. We're also told that you can look this up. It's the Strong's number H0776, as the case may be. I'll use my tab key to go to a different passage. So let's go to John chapter 1. Okay. Same thing, as I'm moving across, we're getting the instant details are giving me the parsing, and in this case it's telling me it's the preposition en. It's a preposition that's going to be followed by the dative case, and when it's followed by the dative case it means in, with, by, or to. Okay, so in this case it would mean in or at the beginning. All right, and the verb is being parsed for us there instantly. We go across here, we get logos and so on. Now in this case we're not getting we're not being told what the syntactical function is. Okay, we're not being told that it's the complement or it's the subject, whatever, of the phrase, which is a shame given that in John chapter 1, the first couple of verses, that's a bit complex. But anyway, that's an insight into the instant details. So the next thing that I want us to have a look at, the next thing we're going to look at is the word chart. And we looked at the word chart earlier on, but let's just remind ourselves. So let's suppose we have the first 5 verses of John's Gospel. Way too big a chunk really for this purpose, but suppose that's what we're doing. We come up to the word chart icon, and straight away we'll get quite a useful parsing sheet actually for the passage that we're looking at. So I'm going to select all to make it a little bit bigger, because that's the only way I can make it bigger for you in this instance. And I could, for example, I can just slide these across, and if you have your document in landscape mode, this will work quite well when you move it, when you want to copy and paste it across into Word. Okay, so that by making it wider, I'm not using extra lines for the most part. So in this case, what we're getting is a complete word by word analysis, and as the third column says, here is the parsing for that word. So we know the word is en. preposition plus dative, and then a translation. Arche, noun, it's feminine, singular, dative. That's parsing. Okay, a verb, that's the part of speech. Third person singular, imperfect tense, indicative mood. Okay, so as we know, this can be copied and pasted. There's not a single simple way to do that, but you paste what you want, copy and paste it into your Word document, and then you may have to convert it to columns just using your normal text to table conversion tool. So I want to shrink that back down for a moment, and while we're still here, let me just go and show you the other parsing tool, which offers the same thing. I'm tempted to go to the Hebrew first, but let's do this so we compare the two results in Greek, and then we'll do the same thing in Hebrew. So up the top here we have an icon for Parsing Tool, which you may or may not have added to your toolbar. If not, this is a really good time to do it. You just go up onto the toolbar, you right click, choose Customize Toolbar, and you can drag things up or take things off if you don't want them on the toolbar. Okay, so that's worth knowing about. So in this case, I still have the verses selected. I'm simply going to click the parsing icon. Now, it wants me to reselect the, okay, I've got to clear out of this because I had it chosen for another function. Go into parsing. Now I can reopen, and I've got to make this a little bit bigger so it doesn't hurt your eyes. Okay. Now this is very, very similar to what we get with the work chart, but it's a little bit more information, and I think it's a bit more usefully set out for us. So the word chart is here in the other tab. It does have a fairly straightforward and basic parsing. It doesn't give any information about the function. But when we come to the parsing tool, yes, we get the inflected form that's in the text. We get the transliteration of that. We get the stem, or we get the lexical form. So arche and eimi and logos and so on. We get that transliterated as well. And then we get the parsing, but the parsing is written out in full. And even something like pros, it's telling us it's a preposition, but here it's being followed by the accusative. And if we go further over, we see that when pros is followed by a genitive, it means for. When it's followed by a dative, it means at. And when it's followed by the accusative, as it is here, it means to or towards. Okay. And when it's followed by an adverb, it has a slightly different function again. Now, this material down here, which is giving us the more detailed discussion of the parsing, I think is really, really helpful, and well worth checking out when you're doing some parsing exercises. And of course, it's also giving you a much better sense of how the thing is functioning in the total paragraph. Okay, so that's the parsing tool, and I'm just going to repeat that process for us in the Hebrew Bible. Obviously it won't do well on, so let's go Genesis 1 to 3, and it'll go much better in the Hebrew than it will with the Greek thingy. So same basic thing. If we were selecting this whole text and we went to word chart, then we know what we're going to see. We're going to get this, quite helpful, but not as detailed as we get in some other places. And again, we can drag these across and make them wider to suit our particular what we're working on. This is much better if you're simply working on the screen. It's not so good, of course, if you're wanting to copy it into a document. Again, as you go through, you'll get the breakdown, the simple parsing. no discussion of the grammatical function or the syntax, and then you get the sort of the first draft of a translation, what we call the gloss. Now if I shrink that down, clear it again, and just push this out of the way for now. Again, I'm going to select the whole text, and this time I'm going to hit the parsing button. We'll come back up here, and the parsing button is actually even more helpful than it is in the Greek, because I'll make it a bit larger for us. Not only do we have the inflected form, transliterated, the lexical form, transliterated, complete parsing without any abbreviations, we also get, which we don't get in the Greek, when it's a Greek passage, we actually get a summary of the syntax. So we're told this is a time reference, this is the predicate, it's the verb, this is the subject, Elohim, and these words relate to the object of the predicate and the object, of course, which the subject is trying to do or perform. So yes, the word chart is really helpful, but in my mind the parsing tool is even more helpful, although it's not designed to provide you with a worksheet. Okay, this is really good to look up stuff, see what's going on, but the word chart is designed to provide you with a document that you could then print off and go through and annotate it and make it your own working tool. So that's the instant details and also the parsing tool. We've looked at parsing in general. We've looked at the word chart, which is this one up here, quite useful, as I said, particularly useful if you're wanting to print it off as a worksheet and then handwrite it with your own annotations, but you could also type into those columns. And then there's the parsing tool. And if you find that you haven't got the parsing tool available, have a look around. It may just mean it needs to be installed, or it could be that it's something that has to be purchased separately. I'm not entirely sure about that. In any case, I hope that's been a helpful introduction to parsing, both in terms of what parsing is, the kinds of information we're wanting to provide about the words and their functions, and then a couple of tools, the instant details box, the word chart, and the parsing tool, which are available to us in Accordance.